Hey guys, Zomfox here, and we have finally had football games from the USFL. I covered the broadcast of the first game, but now we're going to actually talk about each of the games in a very quick recap and main key points of each game. What was good, what was bad, what players were good, what players were really bad, and stuff like that. So, without further ado, let's get started. The first game of the USFL season was the New Jersey Generals versus the Birmingham Stallions. This game was a really tight-knit game almost the entire time and showed a lot of promise for one team's quarterback group. Essentially, the entire game, New Jersey was pretty much winning or tied, except in the end when the Stallions ended up winning. For the Generals, their dual quarterback group of DeAndre Johnson and Luis Perez was incredible to watch. They could just be intertwined and the team could be great. Luis Perez was a solid passer. He went 13 for 18 with 140 yards. DeAndre Johnson may have only gone 3 for 8, but he ended up leading all players in rushing with 98 rushing yards and 12 attempts. Two of the three amigos were solid. Darius Victor and Williams both had over 50 yards on the ground, which is really solid. And as for defense, Luani had an awesome game with an interception, a nice couple of tackle for losses, and overall was really solid. Their kicker, not so great. Nick Rose kind of did sell the game for him. He missed not one, but 2 field goals, which is pretty pathetic. As for the Stallions, Alex Magoo had one great drive in the beginning of the game, and then was trashed the rest of it. And speaking of first drive, quick shout out to Scatterfield for getting the USFL's first touchdown. Pretty incredible. But yeah, back to the Stallions. Alex Magoo, terrible after that first drive. He got hurt, and him getting hurt was honestly the best thing that could happen to the Stallions. The first 2 drives that Smith was in, Jamar Smith, he was pretty bad, but then once he got past those first couple of drives, he was electric. Drive after drive, play after play, he was getting them down the field. He ended up throwing not only a touchdown pass, but he ran in a touchdown for the game winner, which really did show how good they were. The only problem for the Stallions is that their ground game overall wasn't the best. They averaged 3.1 and 3.4 yards per carry for Marable and Brooks James, which is not what you want. Victor Bolden Jr. showed some of his promise. Overall, the team kind of wanted a more team effort style away, and their kicker, who had never played football before, was solid, 4 for 4 extra points. Solid game, great opening. It was incredible. The second game of the season was the Michigan Panthers versus the Houston Gamblers. This game overall was one that essentially went to me in a way where it feels like the team that won really didn't deserve the win. The Houston Gamblers overall played pretty terrible for the most part. Their first half was basically purely aided by terrible play from Michigan, which included a fumble recovery for a touchdown, as they scored 17 points in the first half and didn't score anything else the rest of the game. And when you have that be the way you win, it's kind of hard for me to look at you and say, yeah, man, your team's awesome. Like, yes, Gooden got 3 forced fumbles, and Northrup also recovered a fumble, and he's the guy that returned it for a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. But, like, overall, it's like, I mean, yeah, they won, but they didn't really do all that much to win it. They had 1 for 2 on field goals, because field goal kicking was just terrible the whole day. The Panthers, however, they also had problems kicking as their kicker missed 1 kick. And to put it simply, if their player at the end of the game would have gotten 1 more foot inbounds, the Panthers would have won the game anyway. So with my power rankings come out, the Panthers are still going to be above the Gamblers. I'm just hitting you guys with that. But to put it simply, they're both going to be a lot closer to each other. They're not going to be 8 for the Gamblers and 2 for the Panthers. It's probably going to be somewhere around like 5 and 6 for the Gamblers and like 3 and 4 for the Panthers, depending on how I feel about everything. I don't know for sure, but all I can tell you is that the Panthers definitely looked like the overall better team than the Gamblers. The Gamblers' offense didn't really do anything for the most part. Clayton Thorson was alright, and that's pretty much all I can say about that game. The third game of the season was the Philadelphia Stars against the New Orleans Breakers. This game was kind of like the last one where it's hard to say if the Breakers are really better than the Stars. To put it simply, the Stars had a really bad beginning. They threw a pretty bad pick 6 at the beginning of the game to New Orleans Breakers' Vontae Diggs, and then after that they got a punt blocked for a safety, and those are the first 9 points that the Breakers got, and after that they did score a couple more times. Overall in this game, I will say I'm overall very impressed with Brian Scott. He was really solid. He wasn't otherworldly, I'm not saying he was awesome, but aside from his 1 interception, he played decent for all things considered. In terms of handling the ball, he did lose a fumble, and he fumbled twice overall, which you don't want to see. Overall, it's hard for me to say that he was terrible. It's hard for me to say he was really that good. And then in terms of running the ball, Holland was very good overall for them. But the Breakers, yeah. Overall, if I were looking at them, Jordan Ellis is definitely a really solid running back. TJ Logan was alright, but when you just compare them, one of them averaged 4.9 in Ellis, and one averaged 3.7 yards carrying Logan Jr., so it's kind of easy to see which was better. As for their QB play, Kyle Sloter, I'm still not sold on him. He was awful in the first half. Terrible. Then in the second half, he was alright. It's hard for me to get behind a guy who I can't really say is that great. So yeah, in terms of him, I'm not gonna say he was this otherworldly player. I really won't. I think that overall he's definitely a weakness on their team. And another thing to understand in this game as well that makes me feel like the Stars overall deserved it more. They had 2 different field goals get missed. The Breakers only missed 1, and that was a big deal overall in terms of the landscape of the game and how things turned out. So kind of sucks, but that's what happened to him. Overall, this was a game that ended up being close when it really couldn't be. So it's hard for me to say exactly everything, but it was a solid game. That's about it. The last game of week 1 was the Tampa Bay Bandits against Pittsburgh Maulers. This game got pushed back by a day due to the weather, and so it kind of just, that's about it. So the game itself was honestly kind of boring in a sense. So the Bandits were clearly the big favorite in this game. I know when I did my odds video, they were only like 1.5 point favorites, but like later they became like 5.5 point favorites, and they definitely covered the spread. This game is honestly the easiest to talk about. It was literally just as basic as you can be. The very beginning of the game, the Bandits were way better than the Maulers. Talmu was awesome, and the Maulers were not awesome. Both their quarterbacks were mid at best, and the team just wasn't that good. But then the second half happened, and to put it simply, Talmu regressed, and he threw like 2 interceptions. He finished the game with only like above average at best numbers, and their running game wasn't that good either. I mean, honestly, both these teams really didn't show a ton for the whole game, but at least the Bandits showed some in the first half. The Maulers definitely looked bad, and they're definitely the worst team, and with that is pretty much it. So that was week 1 in review. To put it simply, all the games, the first one was definitely the best of all of them. The Bandits Maulers was, I think, the worst of all of them. That's pretty much it for this week. My Power Rankings video will be coming out either tomorrow or the day after, and then my betting video will come out, the day after, 2 days after that, depending on when it gets released and stuff like that. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoy this content, subscribe and hit the bell so you'll be notified as soon as I upload a video. And as always, have a great night.